All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're going to completely reframe how we look at our failed goals and our daily habits of delaying things. Because honestly, we've all been there, right? You're staring down this massive project or a brand new fitness goal. You know exactly how important it is, and yet, suddenly you have an overwhelming urge to organize your email inbox, or maybe even color code your bookshelf instead of doing the actual work. Today, we're going to unpack the fascinating science behind exactly why we do this, and more importantly, how we can completely short-circuit this habit by simply changing how we see ourselves.
So why do we do this? I mean, we all genuinely want to become better people. We want to be stronger, healthier, more creative, more skilled. But why is it so incredibly tough to actually stick to new behaviors instead of just putting them off? Why do we actively choose to delay the very things we know will make our lives tangibly better in the long run? It's a massive paradox, and it's one that has puzzled psychologists for decades.
To get to the bottom of this, we'll quickly walk through today's agenda: the procrastination problem, why we actually delay, the 3 layers of change, identity-based habits, and finally, the recipe for success.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the procrastination problem, more than laziness.
We often beat ourselves up thinking our delays are simply character flaws, but academia gives us a pretty stark definition here. Procrastination is an intentional behavioral delay for more than intended, despite expecting to be worse off. The absolutely crucial point here is that procrastination isn't just poor time management or innocently forgetting to do a task. It's an active, intentional avoidance. You are acutely aware that putting this off is going to lead to more stress, lower performance, and a whole lot of regret, yet you voluntarily choose to delay it anyway. It's a profound self-regulatory failure.
And research actually shows us that we don't all procrastinate the exact same way. We can distinguish between passive procrastination, which is where you simply fail to initiate action because you're just paralyzed or totally overwhelmed by a task. But then there's active procrastination. That's where you purposefully hold off on doing the work just so you can use that impending deadline stress and adrenaline as fuel to finally get it done. Regardless of which camp you fall into, though, this intentional delay takes a massive toll on your mental well-being over time.
Moving on to Section 2, why we actually delay, the invisible forces.
What is actually happening in our brains when we choose scrolling over studying or working? Well, it's basically an epic internal psychoanalytic battle. On one side, you have your rational mind. It wants to act, it totally understands the task, and it knows the deadline. But on the other side, you've got your mood mind. And your mood mind absolutely despises the discomfort of the task and just wants immediate emotional relief. So what does it do? It creates this terrible set of intrusive thoughts and anxiety just to keep you from moving forward. You see, you aren't actually avoiding the work itself, you're trying to avoid the negative emotions associated with the work. Once you start the task, those dark thoughts tend to lift, but overcoming that initial emotional clash, that's the hardest part.
Get this, according to temporal motivation theory, the way we value time and expect rewards accounts for a massive 57% of why we delay. That means well over half of our tendency to put things off is deeply hardwired into how our brains literally calculate time and prioritize feeling comfortable right now over succeeding in the future.
And this plays out through a few specific psychological traps. You might recognize temporal discounting. That's our brain's pesky tendency to value smaller, immediate rewards over much larger future rewards. There's also decision paralysis, where you just have so many options you freeze up and delay everything. Then we have low self-efficacy. Simply put, if you don't deeply believe you can actually pull the task off, you just won't start it. And finally, socially prescribed perfectionism. This is that irrational, terrifying fear that your work has to be absolutely flawless on the very first try just to meet other people's expectations. Looking at these traps is actually incredibly validating. It shows us that procrastination is a complex emotional and cognitive response. It completely relieves us of that heavy burden of thinking it's just some moral failing.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 3 layers of change, finding the solution.
Now that we understand the deep psychological problem and the emotional warfare happening in our heads, let's pivot to James Clear's highly practical solution for behavioral change. He uses this incredibly helpful onion metaphor to describe 3 distinct layers of how we change. The outermost layer is changing your outcomes. This is what you get, like losing weight or publishing a book. The middle layer is changing your processes. This is what you do, like starting a new routine at the gym. But the third and absolute deepest layer is changing your identity. This is what you believe about yourself. Now, all these levels are useful, but the problem most of us face is the direction we try to change in. We almost always start from the outside in, obsessing over the outcome. But if your underlying identity hasn't changed, well, those new processes are pretty much doomed to fail.
Let's dig deeper into that with Section 4, Identity-Based Habits. Who do you wish to become?
This right here is the absolute core of building lasting habits, shifting the fundamental direction of how we change. The difference between an outcome-based goal and an identity-based habit is staggering. Most people start with an outcome. They say, I want to lose 20 pounds. That is entirely focused on the result. But an identity-based habit completely flips the script. Instead, you aim to become the type of person who moves more every day. You see, your current behaviors are simply a mirror image of your current identity. So to change your behavior for good and to stop procrastinating, you absolutely must start by focusing on who you wish to become, not just what you want to achieve.
Okay, final piece of the puzzle. Section 5, the recipe for success, sustained change. So how do we actually anchor these theoretical concepts into actionable steps for our daily lives? Changing your deeply held beliefs requires two remarkably straightforward steps. Step 1, decide the type of person you want to be. Step 2, prove it to yourself with small wins. It really is that simple. You figure out the identity that would naturally give you your desired outcome, and then you just start continuously casting these tiny, undeniable votes for that identity through your daily actions.
Clear actually shares this fascinating real-world example about his wife. On her very first day of high school, the teacher asked if anyone could remember all 30 classmates' names. She boldly raised her hand and perfectly named every single person in the room. Just like that, bam. That single, undeniable small win completely cemented her identity. From that moment on, she genuinely believed she was the type of person who was good at remembering names. She proved it to herself, and to this very day, she still maintains that habit effortlessly. So let's see how this builds into our own everyday routines. If you want to be a writer, your small win is to write literally just one paragraph today. Want to be a better friend? Pick up the phone and call one friend every Saturday. Want to be the type of person who is always on time? Start scheduling your meetings with an intentional 15-minute gap. Or if you want to be someone who moves more, just buy a pedometer and walk 50 extra steps today. The crucial point here is to work backward. Find the result you want, identify the type of person who achieves that result, and then execute tiny, undeniable proofs of that identity every single day. Because as James Clear brilliantly points out, in order to believe in a new identity, we have to prove it to ourselves. Look, you absolutely cannot rely on fleeting motivation. Motivation is just a feeling, and honestly, it's going to burn you out after a week. You've got to stop worrying about getting massive, immediate results and start building a system of 1% improvements to consistently prove your new identity to yourself. When you do this, the heavy emotional burden of procrastination naturally just melts away. Because you aren't fighting some massive, scary task anymore, you are simply being who you are. By fully abandoning outcome-based goals and embracing identity-based habits, we can finally bypass the emotional traps of our mood mind and conquer procrastination for good, which leaves us with one final, incredibly important question for you to explore. Who do you wish to become? Start right there, cast your first small vote today, and just watch how your life begins to change. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.